Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode with your girl, Bobby So True. Shout out to you for being here on this podcast. I am so glad to be back to have a conversation with other survivors of narcissistic abuse. Shout out to you, Thriver. Oh my goodness. You guys, look. I want to just dive in. If I can just have a moment to dive in. Before I do that, please, you're welcome to join this community. Find me on all podcast platforms. Find me on YouTube. Find me on all social media platforms. Just search Mommy So True. If you want to contact me to discuss anything, or if I can be support or of help to you while you go through this and navigate life during or after this type of abuse, aka attack, please let me know. Email me at mommysotrue@gmail.com. And all my information, life coaching session link, and any other information that you may need to reach out, it's in that description box. And so check that out. And oh my gosh, if you're new here, you're so welcome, because I know you belong here if you're here. I know you've either gone through this or you're going through it right now. And today there's a special topic on my heart. Before I even dive into the topic, let me add, if you are ever interested in jumping on my podcast to share your story or to dive into one of these topics with me, please reach out, email me, let's connect. Because as time goes on, I will start bringing on guests, and the conversations are going to get so much more raw, real, and deep, so goodness, guys. Oh my gosh. So y'all know that I've shared my story on here, and today is not the day where I'm going to get deep into my story. Today, I want to talk to you more about that brutal cutoff. I want to talk to you about what it's like to actually finally walk away from a narcissistic abuser. And the reason why I'm talking about this now is because the whole purpose of what I do now is to really show what it's like to have survived this and now thrive. And that word thrive is so dear to me. It's so sensitive to me because it took a while to get here. Narcissistic abuse, the healing aspect of it, is not overnight, and it's not easy. And for many of us, because we dealt with this since we were children, the healing is much deeper. It's a lot more of a rough process. It's a lifetime of fighting for your life. It's a lifetime of battling with your identity. It's a lifetime of fighting through depression and anxiety on a high scale. Many of us have, become ill because of this. People are on medications. People have their own mental disorders and mental damage because of this. People have physical damage, autoimmune diseases. There are certain things that I've personally struggled with, and I know that I'm young now. There's no telling what may come up in 5 or 10 years. That's one of the things that a survivor of NPD has to come into terms with, because your body is so affected by this. Your brain is so affected by this. Your entire life is so affected by this. And for so many out there just like me, it got to a point where the cutoff became necessary, because I literally felt like I was dying in my own body. I felt like I was suffocating around my own family. I felt like I didn't know who I was, or I couldn't be who I wanted to be. As confusing as that sound, that's how confused I was. Or that's how confused life felt. I felt like I was unwanted. I felt like I always seemed to stand out everywhere I went. I felt like I wasn't maybe worthy enough is the right way to put it. I had a narcissistic parent, and sadly, discovering that at an older age, it hurt, but I think that I'm one of the people who are lucky to have discovered it at the age that I did. But even when I discovered it, I still didn't fully understand it. I still didn't realize that I was entangled and enmeshed in this narcissistic family cult, is what I like to call it. That's exactly what it feels like. And if that resonates, and if you know exactly what I'm talking about, make sure you like, comment, and share. Because I know now that I am not crazy, and I know that I'm not by myself, and I know that it wasn't me. I grew up always feeling out of place, feeling like I was weird for looking at things from a different light. I always saw how wrong everything was. And I was the type of child who I was kind of scared to do wrong until I started learning what I know now. I started learning manipulative ways from my own mother. And that started getting me in trouble. Like learning how to lie about little things, unnecessary things, because when you grow up in this environment, you have to protect yourself. And it's such a toxic environment that your mechanisms of protection are typically toxic or negative. This is why a lot of narcissistic homes groom narcissistic children. That doesn't mean that every child raised in a narcissistic home has narcissistic personality disorder. There's a difference. You can have traits, but you don't have to have the disorder. Having a disorder is on a whole nother spectrum. It's a whole nother ball game. It's a whole nother dark life. I just thank God that I had an empath father. I had empaths around me. I had an empath godmother. I had an empath neighbor. I had people who poured into me. And so I've always known right from wrong, and I've always had a very strong conscience when it came to right and wrong. I did go through a phase in my life where I was acting out, and I think now, looking back, knowing what I know, it was for attention, looking to be validated. And a lot of those behaviors got me in toxic relationships. It did. All of my relationships haven't been toxic, but majority were. Looking back at it, it's like I always have walked around with a stamp on my forehead that says, I want a narcissist in my life. You know, but it wasn't that. It's just the programming, the conditioning, and how I was groomed, and the things that I normalized. And then on top of that, I was very used to certain things. And when I say that, I would say I was used to seeing a certain lifestyle. Narcissistic homes, at least the one I grew up in early on, as like a preteen, around that age, there was a lot of drinking in the house. There was a lot of partying. There was a lot of just, wild X-rated behavior. The first time I ever saw pornography, it was in my mother's room. Lesbian pornography. First time I was ever introduced to pornography, it was in my mother's room. And I think most children have grown up, discovered porn in their mom's room and all of that. These are not necessarily good things for your child to discover, especially if they're in a household where if they discover it, you can't talk about it. If they discovered it, no one's going to educate them about it. A narcissistic family, parents, they do not teach you. They do not set you up to know good. And ironically, you get chastised for that when you get older. You're expected to know things they never taught you. They never cared to teach you, things that they ignored you about when you were at the age where it was important to give you the attention for, So I'm saying all of that to say there was a lot of lack of love and a lot of toxicity growing up. My view on life was obscured for a very long time. The way that I envisioned marriage and relationships was based on how I was conditioned in my home and what I saw. I always saw myself as like a maid to a man, because that's what my mother pretty much groomed me to be. I always felt that I needed to serve my man. I would be the one to weigh on a man, hands and foot. And I saw my mother actually do the same thing. My mother was the type of narcissistic parent that put men over her children. Men always came before her daughters. Her relationship and her marriage mattered much more than her children. And she would do anything to protect that. And I think that maybe that was, you know, some codependency in her, and also her beliefs of what marriage looked like, because maybe that's what she was taught, or that's what she saw. Because, hey, again, this is a generational problem. Narcissist is not a new thing. Narcissism is not a new thing. This thing been there. I'm just thankful that we can now link it and make sense of our lives and become empowered to move on with our life. And that's what this podcast is about. I'm saying all of that to tell you, all of that led for me to live a very hard life in many ways. I was always a hard worker, managed to keep up a job, keep a roof over my head. But I also went through phases where I didn't have enough to keep a roof over my head. I did get evicted from places, and there was no one to help. In an ideal world, you know, you should be able to lean on family, lean on your parents. And in some narcissistic families, money is used to weaponize the children. They'll spoil the children. They'll give the children all types of stuff. And that's like what they use to have control over you. Financial abuse. Then there's some where you don't get no help. You literally have to beg for help. And the little help that you do get will get thrown in your face whenever the opportunity, you know, comes. And it's like, okay, so you did it for what? You know, you did it so everyone can say that you did it. Or you did it so that you can look me in my face and say that I need you, because they want you to need them. They will cripple their children. And life became crippling enough, hard enough, sad enough, empty enough, lonely enough for me to get to a place where I had to let a lot of people go. And that included my own mother at some point in my life. That included walking away from my own family at some point in my life, getting rid of relationships that did not suit me well, learning how to walk away from relationships before they even became relationships, because they were really relationships. The cutoff is so necessary when you're dealing with narcissists and narcissistic people, narcissist families and parents. You have to get to the place where you know that you are adequate and not inadequate, that you are worth so much and that you are more than enough, because they will program and condition you to believe otherwise. And as long as you believe otherwise, you'll continue to make poor choices. You'll continue to pull what you don't deserve in your life. You'll continue to be a magnet to these narcissistic clowns out here, killing, stealing, and destroying. And you'll continue to keep your life stagnated. The cutoff is necessary, and it needs to necessarily be brutal, respectfully be brutal. Sometimes leave with no explanation, just fall off the face of the earth, because it's time for you to live. Going through this, you don't feel like you're alive. You just feel like you wake up every day and you're existing. And that is not a way to live. That is not a way to live. The cutoff was me embracing my power, the power of knowing I am a child of God. I deserve the best. I am brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous. That's God's child. And I must walk in that light and not be afraid. If that means standing up against my own mother, so be it. The cutoff was brutal because I was silenced for so long. And now I'm healing out loud. And that's what the cutoff did. That's what it will do. That's what it does. It'll allow you to let your own light finally shine. Now you can tap into your life and pay attention to your life, because you haven't this whole time. Now you can stop being afraid to be you, because you have been this whole time. You've been dumbing yourself down to be on a low frequency to low frequency people. And the cutoff is necessarily brutal, because it's like, why have you been doing that? I'm not doing that no more. My bad. Sorry to myself. I so truly apologize to myself. Never again. That cutoff teaches us to be strong. And let me tell you, The stronger you become, the more hated you will be. You'll be despised for healing. You'll be despised for choosing to heal. Your abusers will be so confused and disturbed because you are choosing to be different. You are choosing to walk in your uniqueness, which means you are not tolerating the narcissistic behaviors. You are not sitting and absorbing the manipulation anymore. You are not going to let it rub off on you either. You're going to go do whatever's necessary to make sure your life turns out different. No one is more pissed off than a narcissist that knows that the person they tried to destroy is not destroyed, is undestroyable, comes back harder, come back stronger. It's very disappointing for this person who put in all this work to destroy you. This person who's waiting for their reward from Satan for completing their mission to destroy you. And here you are still standing, glowing, looking brighter and better and happier, doing better than ever before. All because you finally cut them off. You cut that fuel line because that's all they were using you for. Your premium fuel. The type of fuel that's hard to get. And you are a resource. You're like the land of Africa. You're like the motherland. You're resourceful. It all started with you. You are the plug. You're the main line, the main resource, the main source. You had all the power. They always knew that, though. They always knew that. And part of the abuse was to make sure you never find that out. You never figure that out. You never get in tune with that and take your power back and run with it. That's why they're discombobulated when you have figured it out. When you do cut them off. That's why they're playing victim. That's why they're smearing your name. But part of that cutoff and what comes with cutting them off is you get the strength to become unbothered. I don't care. Do what you want, say what you want. That's on you. You can have it. Enjoy it. Have fun.
Going through this healing journey continues to bring a lot of enlightenment and awakening my way. And a lot of you can relate to that. I did mention that my upbringing had a lot to do with some of the things that I've gone through as far as narcissistic abuse. Coming up and growing up in the toxic background, as I mentioned, I've been desensitized to a lot of things. Growing up, we didn't always live in the nicest neighborhoods or the nicest areas. We've always lived more on the middle class side. And sometimes those kind of environments are a little bit more ghetto than necessary. I didn't grow up in the projects, but I grew up around the projects. I saw the projects. I had, friends in school who were from those areas. And so my influence in life was a little different, right? On top of the toxicity that was at home. But furthermore, just for those of you who are sitting at the edge of your seats trying to hear some more juicy details, I just want to throw in there like some of the things that I saw growing up. And what led for this cutoff, because like I said, I got to a place in my life where I felt like I was suffocated. I was not able to just be who I was. It was not comfortable to be me without being talked about or made fun of in my own home. I felt more love at school than I did at home growing up. I grew up in an environment where I watched my mother discard my dad. Now that I know what a discard is. And at the time, I looked at it like that's her decision. She doesn't want to be married no more. I get it. But there's a way you do things. There's a way you handle things. And narcissists handle things very messy, very dramatic, very abruptly. It's very betraying how they do it. I remember my mom claiming she didn't want my dad anymore, divorced, moved us from New York to Ohio, where there was nothing there Such a selfish decision. And I remember finding out a couple months into living in this new state that she had someone else ready to be with, marry this person. And this person lived in another country at the time. I will never forget the day that I walked in on my mother bawling her eyes out because she got news that this person, which we now know is a new supply, this person now actually was already married to someone else. Major devastating news, and it put her in a crazy place in life. And then within a year or two later, here came my stepdad. He was introduced to her through, I don't know, friends or church, I don't know. But by the time he came around, she had started going to church more, taking us to church more, these non-denominational churches where a lot of abuse started happening for me. And I started to normalize this lifestyle of church, being a certain way at church or for church. And then when you go home, it's a whole new life. It was like the conditioning and the programming to come off as angelic and this perfect child. It was so intense. I remember the pressure of just having to always make it look good for everyone else, the church people, the pastor's wife, the other kids. It was almost like conversations with mom was always about competing with everyone, being better than everyone, looking better than everyone. My mother at some point became obsessed with looks, if the hair wasn't perfect, there was a problem. And I got to the phase in my life where I started wanting to be myself. I wanted to get my eyebrows done, do my nails and things like that. By that time, I was probably like 16, 17, and she would not allow it. It was only what she wanted and how she wanted it. The first time I got my eyebrows done, I think I was 15 or 16. I just went and did it with a friend who talked me into doing it. She was like, you damn near have a unibrow. Like, why are you looking like this? You're too pretty for this, right? And she took me to get my eyebrows done. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't ask my mom. Forget telling her. I had the kind of mom where you had to ask. So strict that the strictness was scary. I was very terrified of her growing up. Got my eyebrows done, came home. She was pissed off. She said a lot of mean things. And now it was like, now what I know about a narcissistic mother, I started to threaten her, right? This is me growing into myself, embracing my own looks, my own uniqueness. And she caught a glimpse of me with my eyebrows done and getting into this prettier version of myself. And I think it triggered something. This was when the relationship with me and her started to become bitter. When I was in my teenage years embracing my self-identity, I became a target. Now, we're talking about me being overweight, and if I got one pimple on my face, it would be pointed out, exaggerated, talked about, even in public, made fun of. I was the laughing stock for her. I was the topic of conversation for her friends when they didn't have shit else to talk about, right? Because she had a circle of friends who were either enablers or toxic, broken women who looked up to her. Everyone wanted to be like my mother. Everyone wanted to be her friend because she came off as so perfect, so charming, and she was beautiful. And when I talk about my mother, you guys, don't get me wrong. Everything about her was not bad. Most narcissists that we know some of the qualities they had that even we have picked up. My mother was a strong woman, right? Determined and clean, and she can cook and all of that. But behind that was this person. The cooking and the cleaning and the charm was just the mask. But her real self, her true self, you wouldn't know until you got a little close to her and you start to see how conniving and gossipy and manipulative and materialistic she was, and how she would go as far as to lying about anything, lying on her children to get things from people. And one of the biggest issues for me growing up was being exploited by her. My mother was so into materialistic things and had this unrealistic outlook of life because she always wanted to be rich and have money and be successful and had all these business ideas. But somehow, nothing ever really worked out for her. And so she was always leeching on people, always had her hand out, always looking for someone to give her something, pay for something, buy her something, right? And it was so bad that she was willing to exploit me. I spent years between the age of, I would say, 13 and 16, going to homes of bachelors, cooking for them, cleaning for them. You heard the age I just mentioned. These men were single. These men were perverts. These men were horny. And too many times I almost got raped by people that I called uncle. You know, if you growing up in a African culture, we call everybody auntie and uncle, even though they're freaking not. And these aunties and these uncles will start touching you and doing things to you. And when you have a narcissistic parent or guardian, you're not going to say anything. You're not going to speak up. And these are the some of the things that led for me to obtain some of my own toxic behaviors, like not speaking up, not defending myself, feeling like a victim, feeling worthless, feeling, having negative thoughts, beating myself up, not seeing my value. All of that comes from those type of things. Thank God for healing, guys. This is why the cutoff became necessary. I had to disconnect. I had to take my power back. I had to learn who I was. I had to embrace who I was and be confident and ready to walk in my light. So hard, so painful, so confusing, so much programming, so much conditioning was done, but I had to be willing to finally walk away from it and learn what's necessary for me to live a fulfilling and happy life, and also put a stop to the poisoning that was happening, because eventually with parents like that, environments like that, they will create a narcissist. They will create someone who's highly narcissistic. One of my biggest battles going through this has been unlearning things that I have been taught. This is the beauty and the power of embracing that you are truly an empath. What I am talking about is the cutoff, giving you the opportunity to self-reflect so you can work on you. Some people don't get raised by narc parents and still end up having narcissistic traits that they are not even aware of because of how the environment is, because of toxic relationships that we've never understood were narcissistic. And their behaviors rub off. And not just do their behaviors rub off, the type of things they do to you, it will cause you to step out of character. And when people say stepping out of character, I truly believe when you step out of character, you're stepping into your true character. Because somebody has pushed your buttons for you to have to show that version of yourself. Right? And I think that this type of pain and the things that they do is an eye opener for us to now be self-aware and get ourselves under control, aka regulating our emotions. That cutoff was so necessary. It has become so brutal. I've become so hypervigilant in a way where I am cautious and alert about anyone who's abusing and trying to drag me through narcissistic bullshit. My cutoff game has become so brutal because I don't want any parts of this anymore. And I'm still working on that. I'm still working on getting to the point where I'm not easily triggered. I don't feel like I have to defend myself for the littlest things or the things that, the things that I can't control. Learning how to express myself different and learning how to actually express myself. This cutoff is so necessary because there's so much damage done. There's so much things left unresolved. And none of it is your fault. None of it was your fault. But it's now up to us to embrace our healing. And I don't believe you can heal until you really cut these people off. And it doesn't have to be a permanent decision. You just need to free yourself for a while, a few months, few years, whatever. And get in tune with what you need to do for your life. That cutoff became so necessary. The reason why I'm able to sleep peacefully knowing I've cut off people that I've claimed I've loved is because they were no good for me. And me trying to love them had me committing suicide and pulling myself into darkness, picking up their demons. This is why some of us are now fighting depression, anxiety, all this crap. Those are their demons. Those are demons that they pushed on us, forced on us, because we reacted to the abuse. And a lot of us are facing the consequences of our reactions to the abuse. We're looked at as the crazy ones because of our reactions to the abuse. This is why the cutoff is necessary while healing, as I'm dating, as I'm going through my life. Anytime I encounter someone who reminds me of the pain I felt, the embarrassment, the humiliation, the confusion, my mother's, lack of love brought in my life, in my world, and in my mind, in my heart and soul, I cut them off. I literally run for my life with no remorse, with no regret. You only understand this if you know. If you know, you know. The cutoff is a protection. It's a necessary protective shield after you've been drowning in the sea of narcissists.
I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Thank you for taking your time to listen to your girl today. I'll be back. I'll see you on the next episode. Until next time, guys, stay blessed and stay true.